Hello, everyone. I'm Black Marvin, and today there's a new tool available for everyone, but also for Psytrance producers like me. And it is called Silo by Unfiltered Audio. And today we're going to check it out. I'm going to give you an overview and also some suggestions of Psytrance sound design that you can do with it. So let's go. So this is Silo by Unfiltered Audio. And what it does, it creates granular synthesis from an audio input. There's three modules. There's the granulator, spatializer, and the reverb. My favorite is definitely the granulator. In this video, we're going to make two different sounds. The first one is going to be more in the style of a grid type synth in Psytrance, and the second one is going to be more of an abstract soundscape. In order to demonstrate this plugin, I'm going to use this preset that is called Spikes of Vox, and it's going to be available for my community of students on Patreon. It sounds like this. So there's already a glitchy feeling to it, but we're mostly going to take advantage of the like digital vocal feeling of it. Now, what Silo does is that while using a buffer of either samples, time, or a tempo, it's going to create a buffer and it's going to source its grain to make its granular synthesis from that buffer. So for example, if I just enter some audio, you can see that this is the source. This is the buffer being created from real-time audio input. Let me just change the mask setting to that. And we're going to get back to that setting actually. But in order to demonstrate everything correctly, that will be better. So we have these four knobs here. But basically, like I said, it is creating grains and it is sourcing grains from that buffer. This knob here is going to change the size of the grain. This one is going to change the rate regeneration of the grain. So if you have a higher value, you're going to obtain more of a sustained tone, while if it's a lesser value, it's going to be a bit more glitchy and syncopated. The pitch is going to alter the pitch of the grain. And the speed actually is going to be, you see that there's this line here, not the one that is like sort of looping. This one, it's the source of the grain. So you're basically, and it is moving either slowly or fast. And this is changing the sourcing of the grain. So depending on what is your source sound, this can change the texture of the grains. Like you could have seen, depending on where you are in your buffer, it changes the source of the grain drastically. Right now, the values are not going to change from their original intent, but if you put some size deviation here, you're going to introduce some randomization and some fluctuation in that. If you're looking to produce some more sustained atmospheric stuff, it's going to add some randomization, so it can be beneficial for that type of sound. And finally, something really cool, the mask, it's applying, you can see it's not a gating per se, but it's applying some alterations in the grain process, and it gives a glitchy and almost a gatey feel. So yeah, it's affecting the rhythmic of the grains. Spread here will introduce some change and spread between all the grains. Obviously, the more the spread, the more stereo and more a bit alive in the stereo spectrum it will feel. You can introduce some reverse grain, and you can also alter the shape of the grain. And there's lots of algorithms and different shapes that you can choose. Before moving on to the spatializer, let's make a nice glitchy rhythms. Let's make sure it is sourcing with a nice rhythmic and nice glitchy feel. Okay, that will work for what I want to do. And now I'm going to open up the spatializer. By introducing the spatializer, we are introducing some movement in space. And all these parameters gives you control on how it moves the signal through space. Here you have different movement algorithms. So you can see that it is changing the behavior on how the location points moves. Here we have different types of spatialization. We were by default at 3D, but we can do some three-dimensional pitch, some two-dimensional pitch, some regular stereo, and some granular. So so far I really like 3D, but let's try it with the pitch. So in order to understand these, that they all affect the spatial localization here. The range is extending, obviously, the range about how these moves. If you have a very short range, you can see that it is going to be generated pretty close, and it's not going to be a very intense effect. And of course, range all the way up is going to be really drastic in terms of change. Velocity is changing the way all these options, all these locations are generated. It's changing the pace. The higher the velocity, the higher the changes appear. And you can see that there's one dot that is lighten up in that teal color. This is the main or the current localization. And if you put more jump, it's gonna go faster to all these potential locations. So, and obviously, the higher these values, the glitchier and the more unstable the signal is going to be. Let's try with a stereo. Yeah, it is a bit cleaner because the 3D, the pitched thing, of course, it introduced some alteration in the pitch too. So stereo feels a bit cleaner, but different uses. And granular. And granular is cool too. It feels also a bit more stable, but I really like the 3D because of the spatialization. Feeling some sounds are more in your face, and some sounds you can perceive them more a bit far in the back. It is really psychedelic. Moving on to the less exciting module, but still interesting. It's the reverb. And
if you've worked with some of the Valhalla stuff, it reminds me the Valhalla stuff, and it's pretty simple. There's the big mix level here, obviously, some dry and wet knob. There's you have different mix algorithm here. You have three reverb algorithm. The normal one is basically like a normal reverb. So you're going to have some dry signal and some wet signal. Solo is you're only going to have the reverb signal, and balance is that it's always going to balance the amount of reverb in relation to the number of dry grains. So if you have a lot of dry grains, it's gonna add more reverb, and if you don't have many grains, it's gonna put less reverb. So this one is really like adding a reverb coat to your sound, because it's always gonna take in account the dry signal. So I'm gonna cycle through these quickly to show you. And then here you have a couple of classic reverb alteration that you can do to your reverb signal. And there's some filtering and, the classic decay, distance, damping. Now on your output, you have a mix knob and you have a compression knob, which is really cool and really useful because, when you're basically generating stuff that isn't, that is random and linear, and you add, many, many alterations to the sound. There's some difference in 3D, in depth, in stereo. It goes left to right and everywhere. So basically, you're creating something that is not equal, and compression will be there to like make sure everything is leveled out. So if you remove some compression, you're gonna deal with a bit of more instability in the signal, and sometimes that can be something you want. But applying some compression can help you make sure that everything is in control. Now, in order to generate the grid type synth I was telling you about, I'm going to remove the reverb for now because I want those glitch here. To me, the way the preset is set up would be perfect for generating grid type synths. I would use the same technique that I used in the previous video. If you have seen my Cyclone video, I suggest you go check that out. I use a resampling technique. And if you're a Psytrance producer and you've watched a couple of videos, you should be familiar with that resampling technique. So yeah, basically just playing with the size here, playing with the rate and generating some nice stuff should really do it for a grid type synth. Now to generate an abstract soundscape and an abstract atmosphere, I'm going to source this sound, which is a pluck, again, taken from the same sound library. I wanted to use a pluck and not a sound that is already sustained in order to show you the power of granular synthesis. So this is the source. So really just repetitive percussive plucks. And I'm going to dial in silo here. And we're going to start working. I'm going to reset the preset here. But right now, I'm going to be looking for a bit more sustained grains. And that is now in the style of an abstract atmosphere. You could then change the source sound. I really wanted to use something that was not close, to an actual soundscape, something really percussive, and then show you how you can transform that into a sustained and abstract soundscape. But some key elements there, basically, like I said, I went to get the most sustained feel of the grains that I could get. And then here, the mix of the reverb is in solo. I chose a tone that resulted into a pleasing abstract soundscape. I added a lot of decay, a lot of distance, and an important thing here, I chose an high pass filter and I removed some of the low frequencies in order to have something that is really ethereal and atmospheric and not something that is too muddy in the low frequencies. And that was my overview of Silo and some suggestions on how you can use this tool in your Psytrance productions.
And that's it for this video. I'm a big fan of granular synthesis. I think it's one of the styles of synthesis in the future because there's so many possibilities. So if you're interested in that subject, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. There's a lot of past videos that I did on that, and there will be in the future. Not just for this plugin. There's a lot of synthesizers and plugins that does granular synthesis, so there's going to be more of that. So don't miss this. And also make sure you check out the community of students that I'm building on Patreon. The link will be in the description if you need some one-to-one lessons, some mentorship, some presets, private streams, tons of goodies. Make sure you check that out. And until then, I will see you in another video. Cheers.